The planet Verith had many wonders. Crystal mountains that sang when the wind passed through them. Rivers that glowed soft blue under the twin moons. Forests where the trees grew so tall that their tops disappeared into the clouds. But nothing on Verith was more wonderful or more terrifying than the dragons of Ember Valley. For 3,000 years, no outsider had set foot in that sacred place and lived to tell about it. The dragons made sure of that. They were ancient beings, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They remembered a time when their kind ruled 100 worlds. Now they kept to themselves, asking only to be left alone. Anyone foolish enough to ignore their warnings found out quickly why dragons had survived so long. Park Soo-min knew all of this. She had studied dragons for 12 years. She worked at a small research outpost built on the edge of dragon territory, close enough to observe, but far enough to stay safe. Every day, she watched them through long-range sensors. She recorded their flight patterns. She listened to their songs echo across the valley. She never once tried to get closer, though other researchers thought she was too careful. They wanted to send drones into the valley. They talked about capturing a hatchling for study. Soo-min always voted against these ideas. She understood something her colleagues did not. The dragons were not animals to be studied like lab specimens. They were people. Different from humans, yes, but people all the same. They deserved respect. On the morning, everything changed. Soo-min was eating breakfast alone in the observation room. She liked the quiet hours before the others woke up. The sunrise on Verith painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. She watched 3 adult dragons rise from the valley and head north. Hunting trip, she noted in her log. The adults often flew to the northern mountains where large prey was plentiful. They would be gone for about 3 days. She was about to pour her second cup of tea when the ground shook. The earthquake lasted only 40 seconds, but those 40 seconds changed everything. Soo-min grabbed the edge of her desk as equipment crashed around her. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights flashed red. When the shaking finally stopped, she ran to her sensors to check the damage. What she saw made her blood turn cold. The main nursery cave in Ember Valley had partially collapsed. The thermal imaging showed the structure was badly damaged. Worse than that, Soo-min's atmospheric sensors detected something terrible. Toxic gases were leaking into the cave from deep underground. The earthquake had cracked open pockets of poison that had been sealed for millions of years. The adult dragons were 3 days away. The hatchlings were trapped inside that cave, alone, with no way to escape, and no one to help them. Soo-min ran the numbers on her computer. Based on the gas concentration and the rate of increase, the hatchlings had maybe 12 hours. After that, the poison would be too thick. They would suffocate in their sleep, never knowing why their parents did not come to save them. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. She thought about the young dragons she had watched through her cameras. They were so small, barely bigger than dogs. Their scales had not hardened yet. Their fire glands had not developed. They could not fly, could not fight, could not protect themselves. They were children, and they were going to die. By now, other researchers had gathered in the observation room. They saw the same data Soo-min saw. They understood the situation, but their response was different from hers. "There is nothing we can do," said Dr. Chun, the outpost director. "The valley is forbidden. If we go in there, the dragons will kill us when they return, assuming we even survive the cave. We cannot just let them die," Soo-min said. "They are babies. They are dragon babies. Not our responsibility. Not our right to interfere." Another researcher, a young man named Kwon Jae-ho, shook his head sadly. "Even if we wanted to help, how would we do it? The cave is collapsed. The gas is deadly. We do not have the equipment for a rescue mission. Su-min looked around at her colleagues. She saw fear in their eyes. She saw the logic in their arguments. They were not wrong. Going into Ember Valley meant almost certain death. The dragons did not forgive trespassers. The cave was dangerous. The mission was probably impossible, but she also thought about something her grandmother used to say. When Su-min was a little girl, her grandmother would tell her stories about the old days on Earth, about people who risked everything to save others, about the belief that some things matter more than survival. A life that is only about staying safe is not really a life at all, her grandmother would say. When the moment comes, you will know what to do. And you will do it, because that is who you are. Su-min had always wondered what her grandmother meant. Now she knew. She walked to her locker and started packing a bag. Emergency breathing equipment, medical supplies, rope, flashlights, protein bars, water. She moved quickly and quietly. Not looking at the others. Dr. Chun watched her with growing alarm. What are you doing? Su-min, this is suicide. I forbid you to go. You cannot forbid me to do anything, she said calmly. I am not military. I am not your employee. I am a researcher who chooses her own projects. And right now, my project is saving those hatchlings. The dragons will kill you. Maybe, probably. But at least I will die knowing I tried. She zipped up her bag and threw it over her shoulder. If I'm not back in 24 hours, tell my family I love them. And tell the dragons that I meant no disrespect. I only wanted to help their children. She walked out of the outpost before anyone could stop her. The morning sun was warm on her face. The Ember Valley waited in the distance, ancient and forbidden. Somewhere inside that valley, 17 baby dragons were slowly dying. Su-min started walking toward them. She did not know if she would succeed. She did not know if she would survive. But she knew one thing with perfect certainty. She could not stand by and do nothing while children died. Even if those children had scales and wings. Even if saving them meant breaking every rule. Even if it cost her everything. Some prices were worth paying. The boundary stones began to glow red as she approached the edge of dragon territory. Ancient warnings carved in languages older than human civilization. Turn back, they seemed to say. Death waits here for those who do not belong. Su-min took a deep breath and crossed the line. The moment Su-min crossed into Forbidden's territory, she felt it. A change in the air. A heaviness that pressed against her skin. The ancient magic of the dragons warning her to turn back. She ignored it and kept walking. The boundary stones behind her pulsed with angry red light. She knew what that meant. Somewhere far away, the adult dragons were receiving a signal. An intruder had entered their sacred land. They would be coming. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. She had a small window of time, and she intended to use every second of it. As she moved deeper into Ember Valley, Su-min saw things no human had seen in 3,000 years. The valley was not just a nesting ground. It was a civilization. Great pillars of carved stone rose from the earth, covered in symbols and images. Dragons flying through starfields. Dragons building cities on distant worlds. Dragons mourning their dead and celebrating their young. This was their history, written in rock for anyone who cared to look. But no one had ever looked. Humans saw only the fire and the teeth. They never thought to see anything else. Su-min walked past a waterfall where the water ran warm from underground hot springs. She saw platforms carved into the cliff faces. Places where dragons had gathered for thousands of years to discuss matters of importance. She saw gardens of strange flowers that glowed in shades of blue and gold, tended by generations of careful claws. The dragons were not mindless beasts. They never had been. They were artists and philosophers, historians and teachers. They had simply chosen to hide their true nature from a galaxy that feared them. Su-min felt shame for her species. Humans had been on Virith for 200 years. In all that time, they had never tried to understand the dragons. They had only tried to control them, contain them, study them from a safe distance. They had missed so much, but there was no time for shame now. The nursery cave was close. She could see the entrance ahead, a great opening in the mountainside marked by carved dragons standing guard. Smoke rose from the damaged structure. The earthquake had done terrible things to this ancient place. When Su-min reached the entrance, her heart sank. The cave mouth was completely blocked. Huge stones, each one bigger than a ground car, had fallen from above and sealed the way inside. She could hear nothing from within. No chirping, no crying, only silence. For a moment she wanted to give up. The obstacle seemed impossible. She was one small human with no heavy equipment, no drilling machines, no help coming. How could she possibly move these massive rocks? Then she remembered the hatchlings. 17 babies waiting in the dark, breathing poison with every breath. They did not know help was coming. They did not know anyone cared enough to try. If she gave up now, they would die alone, and afraid Su-min dropped her bag and got to work. She found smaller stones first and rolled them aside. She dug at the gaps between larger rocks, using her hands when her tools were not enough. The work was brutal. Her muscles screamed. Sweat soaked through her clothes. The sun moved across the sky, and she did not stop to eat or rest. By late afternoon, her hands were bleeding. The rough stone had torn through her gloves and scraped the skin from her palms. She wrapped them in bandages and kept going. Blood soaked through the white cloth and turned it red. She did not care. Night fell over Ember Valley. The twin moons rose, casting silver light across the mountains. Su-min worked by flashlight now, her movements slower but no less determined. She had cleared maybe a third of the blockage. It was not enough. The gas levels in the cave were rising faster than her sensors had predicted. She thought about the people back at the outpost. They were probably watching her on their cameras, shaking their heads at her foolishness. Dr. Chun was probably writing a report about her unauthorized entry into dragon territory. Quan Jae-ho was probably feeling guilty for not stopping her. None of that mattered. What mattered was the next stone. And the next. And the next. Sometime after midnight, Su-min found a gap. A small opening, just barely big enough for her to squeeze through. She shined her flashlight inside and saw a tunnel leading deeper into the mountain. The air that came out was thick and foul, heavy with the poison gas her sensors had detected. She pulled out her emergency breathing equipment. It was not designed for long-term use. Maybe 4 hours of filtered air if she was lucky. After that, she would be breathing the same poison as the hatchlings. But 4 hours was enough. It had to be enough. Su-min squeezed through the gap. The tunnel beyond was narrow and dark. She had to crawl on her hands and knees in some places. The stone walls pressed close around her, and she felt the weight of the mountain above. One more earthquake, and she would be buried forever. She pushed that thought away and kept moving. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Su-min stood up and swept her flashlight across the space. What she saw made her gasp. The nursery was beautiful. Even damaged, even filling with poison, it was one of the most amazing places she had ever seen. The walls were covered in soft moss that glowed with gentle bioluminescence. Nests made of woven branches and shed scales dotted the floor, each one carefully crafted. Crystals hung from the ceiling, catching the light and scattering it into rainbows. And there, huddled together in the center of the chamber, were the Hatchlings. 17 small dragons pressed close for warmth and comfort. Their scales were soft, not yet hardened into the armor of adults. Their wings were tiny, useless for flight. Their eyes were barely open, clouded with the effects of the poison they had been breathing for hours. One of them, a small golden female, lifted her head at the light. She made a weak sound, something between a chirp and a cry. She was calling for her mother. But her mother was 3 days away, and the only one who had come was a strange, soft creature with no wings and no fire. Su-min felt tears running down her face. "I am here," she whispered. "I am here. I will get you out." The hatchling did not understand her words, but somehow she seemed to understand her meaning. She stumbled towards Su-min on unsteady legs, pressing her small, warm body against the human's ankle. Su-min knelt down and gently picked her up. The hatchling weighed almost nothing. Her scales were smooth like river stones, and her eyes were the color of sunset. She tucked her head under Su-min's chin and made a soft sound of trust. That simple act of faith nearly broke Su-min's heart. This baby dragon had every reason to fear her. Humans and dragons had been enemies for centuries. Yet here was this tiny creature, choosing to believe that Su-min had come to help. "I will not let you down," Su-min said. "I promise." She looked at the other hatchlings, still huddled in the center of the chamber. 16 more lives depending on her. The tunnel behind her was narrow and unstable. The poison was getting thicker by the minute. Her breathing equipment was already showing signs of strain. The task ahead was almost impossible. But Su-min had made a promise. She intended to keep it. Su-min worked out a plan in her head. She could carry 2 hatchlings at a time, maybe 3 if they were small enough. The tunnel to the outside was narrow but passable. Each trip would take about 20 minutes. She had 16 hatchlings to save, plus the golden one already clinging to her shoulder. The math was not good. At 2 hatchlings per trip, she needed at least 8 trips. That was nearly 3 hours of constant work, assuming nothing went wrong. And something always went wrong. But math did not matter right now. What mattered was moving. What mattered was starting. She gently placed the golden hatchling in her bag, leaving the top open so she could breathe. The little dragon seemed to understand that she needed to stay still. She curled up at the bottom of the bag like she belonged there. Su-min walked to the cluster of remaining hatchlings. They watched her approach with wide, frightened eyes. Some of them tried to crawl away. Others huddled closer together, as if they could protect each other from this strange invader. "It is okay," she said softly. "I know I look scary. I know I smell wrong. But I'm not here to hurt you. I am here to take you somewhere safe." She reached down slowly, giving them time to see her movements. 2 of the larger hatchlings sniffed her hands. One of them, a deep blue male with silver spots, licked her palm. His tongue was rough but gentle. "That is right," Su-min said. "I am a friend. Can I pick you up?" The blue hatchling seemed to consider this. Then he stepped forward and allowed her to lift him. She cradled him against her chest with one arm and reached for another hatchling with her free hand. This one was smaller, a pale green female who trembled as Su-min touched her, but she did not bite or scratch. She let herself be carried, with 2 hatchlings in her arms and 1 in her bag. Su-min began the long walk back through the tunnel. The golden hatchling poked her head out of the bag and watched the journey with curious eyes. The other 2 stayed quiet, perhaps sensing that noise might attract danger. The tunnel felt longer this time. The weight of the hatchlings made every step harder. The poison in the air was stronger now, and Su-min could feel it burning at the edges of her breathing mask. Her equipment was struggling to filter out all the toxins. When she finally reached the gap leading outside, she set down the hatchlings carefully. Fresh air rushed in, and the babies took deep breaths, their small bodies shaking with relief. Su-min guided them to a safe spot away from the collapsed entrance, a small hollow behind some rocks where they would be sheltered. "Stay here," she told them. I am going back for the others. The golden hatchling chirped in protest as Su-min removed her from the bag. She did not want to be left behind. She wanted to stay close to the warm human who had saved her. I know, Su-min said, stroking her soft scales. But I cannot carry you and save the others at the same time. I will come back, I promise. She turned and crawled back into the tunnel before she could change her mind. The second trip went faster. Su-min knew the path now. She grabbed 2 more. Hatchlings, a pair of dark red siblings who refused to be separated, and carried them out. By the time she returned for the third trip, her legs were shaking with exhaustion. The nursery chamber was getting worse. The bioluminescent moss was starting to dim as the poison killed it. The crystals on the ceiling had lost their sparkle, and the remaining hatchlings were weaker than before. Their movements slow and sluggish. Su-min did not let herself think about what would happen if she was too slow. She just kept moving. Grabbed 2 hatchlings, walked through the tunnel. Set them down outside. Go back, again, and again, and again. On her 5th trip, disaster struck. She was halfway through the tunnel, carrying a black hatchling and a white one, when the ground shook. Another aftershock from the original earthquake. Smaller than the first. One, but in the damaged tunnel, it did not need to be big. Rocks fell from above. Su-min threw herself forward, shielding the hatchlings with her body. Something heavy struck her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. She heard the sound of stone grinding against stone, and then everything went quiet. When she opened her eyes, she saw that the tunnel behind her had collapsed. The path back to the nursery was gone. The remaining hatchlings were trapped on the other side. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She tried to move the fallen rocks, but her injured shoulder screamed in protest. The 2 hatchlings in her arms whimpered with fear. They could sense her panic, her desperation. Su-min forced herself to breathe. Panicking would not help anyone. She needed to think. The tunnel was blocked, but she had studied the structure of this mountain. She remembered seeing other passages on her way in, smaller openings that branched off from the main path. Maybe one of them led back to the nursery. Maybe there was another way. She carried the 2 hatchlings outside and placed them with the others. 11 babies now, clustered together in their sheltered hollow. The golden hatchling immediately came to check on the newcomers, nudging them with her nose as if counting to make sure everyone was there. 6 more, Su-min said to her. I have to save 6 more. She looked at her shoulder. Blood was seeping through her shirt. The joint felt wrong, possibly dislocated. She could not move her arm above her chest without gasping in pain. None of that mattered. She wrapped her arm against her body with strips of cloth from her bag. It would have to do. Then she started searching for another way into the mountain. It took her 30 precious minutes to find it. A narrow crack in the rock face, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. The opening was barely wider than her body. She would have to squeeze through sideways, inch by inch. Su-min did not hesitate. She pushed herself into the crack. The stone pressed against her chest and back. She could barely breathe. Every movement scraped her skin raw. But she kept going, pulled forward by the thought of 6 small dragons waiting in the dark. When she finally emerged into the nursery chamber, the first thing she noticed was the silence. The hatchlings were no longer chirping or crying. They lay still in their nests, barely breathing. The poison had almost won. Su-min ran to them. Their scales were cool to the touch, their eyes closed. But they were still alive. She could see their tiny chests rising and falling, slow and weak. Wake up, she said, shaking them gently. Please wake up. I am here. We have to go. The hatchlings stirred. One by one, they opened their clouded eyes. They saw the strange human standing over them, and something in her voice made them understand. This was their chance. Maybe their last chance. Su-Min picked up 2 of them and started toward the crack in the wall. She would save them all. She had to. No matter what it cost her. The crack in the rock was even harder to navigate while carrying hatchlings. Su-Min had to move sideways, her injured shoulder pressed against cold stone, while 2 small dragons clung to her chest. Every inch was agony. Every breath was a victory. The hatchlings seemed to sense that they needed to be still. They buried their faces against her shirt and did not squirm. Their trust made Su-Min's heart ache. These babies had known her for less than an hour, but they believed in her completely. She would rather die than betray that faith. When she emerged from the crack, the fresh air hit her like a wave. She stumbled to the hollow where the others waited and set down her 2 passengers. 13 saved. 4 to go, but something was wrong. Her breathing mask was making a strange sound. A high-pitched whine that meant the filters were failing. She checked the indicator on the side. The light that should have been green was now orange, fading toward red. The poison gas had been too much. Her equipment was dying. Su-Min looked at the crack leading back into the mountain. 4 hatchlings still inside. Maybe 30 minutes of filtered air left. After that, she would be breathing pure poison. She thought about stopping. She thought about waiting for the adult dragons to return and hoping they could save their own young. She thought about her family back home, her mother who would cry when she learned what happened, her younger brother who always said she was too selfless for her own good. Then she thought about 4 small dragons. Alone in the dark, wondering why the soft creature had stopped coming back for them. Su-Min took off her breathing mask. She needed to save the filters for inside the cave, where the poison was thickest. Out here, the air was clean enough to breathe. She would be fine. She walked back to the crack and squeezed herself inside. The journey felt endless. Her body was screaming for rest. Her shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. Her hands left red smears on the stone from wounds that had reopened. But she kept moving, because stopping meant giving up. And giving up was not something she knew how to do. The nursery was worse than before. The bioluminescent moss had gone completely dark. Su-Min could barely see the 4 remaining hatchlings huddled in the corner. Their breathing was shallow, barely there. They were fading. She pulled on her mask and felt the weak flow of filtered air. It was not enough. The poison was seeping through anyway, burning her throat, making her dizzy. But it was better than nothing. 2 more trips, she told herself. Just 2 more trips. She gathered 2 hatchlings and made her way back through the crack. The stone walls seemed to press closer this time. Or maybe she was just weaker. Either way, she pushed through. 15 saved. 2 to go. By the time she returned to the nursery, her mask had stopped working entirely. The light on the indicator was solid red, then black. Dead. Useless. Su-Min breathed the poison air anyway. It tasted like metal and rot. It made her lungs feel like they were full of broken glass. She coughed, and the coughing made it worse. But she kept her eyes open and focused on the 2 hatchlings waiting for her. They were the smallest of the group. A pair of bronze twins, so young their scales had barely started to form patterns. They could not even walk properly yet. They just crawled toward her on unsteady legs, making tiny sounds of fear and hope. "Last trip," she said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, thick and far away. "We are almost done." She picked them up and held them close. Their bodies were warm against her chest. Warm and alive. That was all that mattered. The crack seemed to go on forever. Su-Min's vision was starting to blur at the edges. The poison was in her blood now, spreading through her body. She could feel it stealing her strength, dimming her thoughts. But she could also see light ahead. The exit. Freedom. She pushed harder. When she finally stumbled out of the crack, she almost fell. Her legs did not want to work anymore. Her arms were shaking so badly she was afraid she would drop the hatchlings. Somehow, she made it to the hollow and set them down with the others. 17 hatchlings. All alive. All safe. Sue-Min sank to her knees beside them. The golden hatchling, the one she had named Bile in her heart, immediately climbed into her lap. She pressed her small body against Sue-Min's stomach and made a sound like purring. "We did it," Sue-Min whispered. "We actually did it." She looked at the babies around her. 17 small dragons, watching her with grateful eyes. They did not understand what she had done for them. They did not know about the poison in her lungs or the pain in her body. They only knew that she had come for them when no one else would. Sue-Min wanted to stand up. She wanted to call her outpost and tell them the mission was successful. She wanted to find a safe place to wait for the adult dragons and explain what had happened. But her body would not cooperate. The poison had done too much damage. She could feel it now, spreading through her like cold water. Her lungs were not working right. Each breath brought less air than the last. Her heartbeat was slowing, stumbling, losing its rhythm. She had known this might happen. She had made peace with it the moment she crossed into dragon territory. Some things were worth dying for. 17 innocent lives were definitely on that list. Sue-Min lay back against the rocks and looked up at the sky. The twin moons of Verith were setting, making room for the dawn. The first rays of sunlight were touching the peaks of Ember Valley, turning them gold and pink and orange. It was beautiful. Such a beautiful place to rest. Byel chirped in distress. She could sense something was wrong with her savior. She pressed closer, trying to share her warmth, trying to make the human better. The other hatchlings gathered around too, forming a circle of small, worried bodies. "It is okay," Sue-Min told them. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "You are safe. That is all that matters." She reached out with a trembling hand and stroked Byle's golden scales one last time. The hatchling leaned into her touch, and Sue-Min smiled. She thought about her grandmother's words, about how some moments define who you are, about how the measure of a life is not how long it lasts, but how much love it holds. Sue-Min closed her eyes. She had no regrets. The morning sun rose higher over Ember Valley, but Sue-Min did not see it. Her eyes stayed closed. Her breathing grew slower and slower, each breath requiring more effort than the last. The poison had done its work too well. Around her, the 17 hatchlings grew more and more distressed. They did not understand why the kind human had stopped moving. They did not understand why her skin was turning pale, why her hands had gone cold. They only knew that something was terribly wrong. Bile, the golden hatchling, refused to leave Sue-Min's side. She pressed herself against the human's chest, as close as she could get, trying to share her warmth. Dragons were creatures of fire, and even as babies, their bodies ran hot. Bile hoped that her heat would help somehow. It was all she knew how to do. The other hatchlings gathered in a tight circle. Some of them made soft crying sounds. Others simply sat in silence, their young eyes fixed on the woman who had saved them. They had known her for only a few hours, but in that time, she had become the center of their world. Inside the darkness of her failing body, Sue-Min drifted. She saw her childhood, home on Earth, the small apartment where she had grown up with her mother and brother and grandmother. She saw the kitchen where her grandmother had taught her to cook, patient hands guiding hers through each step. She saw the backyard where she had found an injured bird and nursed it back to health. Her first act of rescue, the beginning of everything. She saw her years of study, late nights in the library, reading everything she could about alien life. Her first job at a research station on a moon she could not even pronounce. The day she arrived on Verith and saw dragons for the first time, soaring across the sunset sky like living fire. She saw the choices that had led her here. Every small decision, every moment of compassion, every time she had chosen kindness over convenience. Her grandmother had been right. Life was not about staying safe. It was about becoming the person you were meant to be. Su-min's heart gave one final beat, and then it stopped. The hatchlings felt the change instantly. Bile lifted her head and let out a sound that no one in the outpost had ever recorded. It was not a chirp or a cry. It was something older, something that came from deep within dragon memory. A sound of grief. One by one, the other hatchlings joined her. Their voices rose into the morning air, a chorus of mourning that echoed across Ember Valley. They did not know the human's name. They did not know where she came from or why she had risked everything for them. But they knew she was gone, and they knew they owed her their lives. Back at the research outpost, the scientists heard the sound through their sensors. Dr. Chen leaned forward, his face pale. "What is that?" Quan Jeho checked his readings with shaking hands. "It is the hatchlings. 17 of them. They are all outside the nursery cave." "She did it," someone whispered. "She actually saved them all." Dr. Chun pulled up another screen. The life signs monitor they had been using to track Su-min. The screen showed a flat line. No heartbeat. No breathing. No brain activity. The room went silent. "She saved them," Jeho said quietly. "And it killed her." No one spoke. What was there to say? They had watched her go. They had told her it was suicide. They had been right, and being right had never felt more terrible. In Ember Valley, the hatchlings continued their morning song. They did not know that their parents were close now, flying as fast as their wings could carry them. They did not know that the distress signals had reached the hunting party 2 days ago, and the adults had turned back immediately. Elder Carveth led the flight. He was the oldest dragon on Verith, nearly 6,000 years old. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had watched his own kind dwindle from billions to mere thousands. He had lost friends, family, entire worlds, but nothing had ever terrified him, like the signal from the nursery. His wings beat against the wind as he pushed himself faster. Behind him flew 24 adult dragons, parents and guardians of the hatchlings in the cave. They had not rested since they received the alarm. They had not eaten. They had only flown, driven by a fear that no parent in any species could ignore. As they approached Ember Valley, Carveth heard the sound. The morning song. His ancient heart clenched with dread. The song meant death. Something in the nursery had died. He swooped lower, his sharp eyes scanning the ground. What he saw made him pull up short, hovering in confusion. The hatchlings were outside the cave. All of them, as far as he could count. They were gathered in a small hollow near a crack in the mountainside. They were alive. They were singing, and they were standing around a human body. Carveth landed heavily, his massive form sending tremors through the ground. The other dragons landed behind him, spreading out in a defensive formation. But there was no enemy here. No threat. Just 17 baby dragons mourning a dead intruder. "What is this?" Carveth rumbled. His voice was deep and old, like stone grinding against stone. The hatchlings looked up at him with wide eyes. Bile, the golden female, stepped forward. She was tiny compared to the elder, barely reaching his ankle. But she stood her ground, placing herself between Carveth and Su-min's body. She sent him an image. It was the way young dragons communicated, through pictures and feelings instead of words. Carveth saw everything. He saw the earthquake, the collapse, the poison filling the nursery. He saw a small human woman working through the night to clear the entrance. He saw her squeezing through impossible spaces, carrying hatchlings 2 at a time. He saw her returning again and again, even as her equipment failed. Even as the poison filled her lungs. He saw her die with a smile on her face, surrounded by the babies she had saved. The elder dragon stood very still. Around him, the other adults received the same images from their children. One mother let out a sound of shock. A father lowered his head in something that might have been shame. They had expected to find tragedy. They had expected to find enemies. Instead, they found a gift beyond measure, paid for with a price beyond imagining. Carveth looked down at the small human body. She looked so fragile lying there, so breakable. And yet she had done what no dragon could have done. She had reached the hatchlings in time. She had carried them to safety one by one. She had given everything. The elder dragon had lived for 6,000 years. He had seen heroes and villains, saints and monsters. He knew that true courage was rare in any species. Thought this human woman had been truly courageous. He did not know what to do next, but he knew that something had to be done. Something worthy of the sacrifice that had been made. The sun continued to rise over Ember Valley. The hatchlings continued their song. And Elder Carveth stood in silence, trying to understand how the galaxy had changed forever in a single night. The dragons of Ember Valley had rules. Ancient laws that had governed their kind for longer than most species had existed. One of the oldest and most sacred of these laws was simple. No outsider enters the valley and lives. It was not cruelty that created this law. It was survival. In the early days, other species had come to dragon worlds to steal eggs, to capture hatchlings, to enslave the young and force them to fight in arenas. The dragons had learned through pain that isolation was the only protection. So they drew their boundaries and they enforced them without exception. Elder Carveth had enforced this law many times. He had driven away trespassers. He had destroyed those who would not leave. He had never once questioned whether it was right. The safety of dragon children was worth any price. But now he stood over the body of a trespasser who had died to protect those same children. And for the first time in his long life, he did not know what the law required. The other adults gathered around him, waiting for guidance. They were confused too. Their instincts told them to be angry, to see the human as an invader, to resent her presence in their sacred space. But their hearts told them something different. Their hearts told them they were looking at a hero. "What do we do?" asked a young mother named Seraphil. Her twin daughters, the bronze hatchlings, were among those Sumin had saved. "She broke our law, but she saved our children. She should not have been here," growled an old male called Thornix. "The law exists for a reason. If we honor her, we invite others to trespass. And if we do not honor her," Seraphil shot back, "she gave her life for our young. If we treat her like a criminal, what does that say about us?" The argument spread through the gathered dragons. Some sided with Thornix, pointing to tradition and the need for boundaries. Others sided with Seraphil, arguing that courage deserved recognition regardless of species. The debate grew heated, voices rising, ancient tensions bubbling to the surface. Through it all, Carveth remained silent. He watched. He listened. He thought when he finally spoke, his voice cut through the noise like thunder. Enough. The other dragons fell quiet immediately. Carveth was their elder, their leader, their living connection to the past. When he spoke, they listened. "I have lived for 6,000 years, he said slowly. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species evolve and go extinct. I have witnessed acts of incredible cruelty and incredible kindness. And in all that time, I have learned one thing above all others." He paused, looking down at Sumin's peaceful face. "The measure of a soul is not where it comes from. It is what it does, what it chooses, what it sacrifices." He turned to face the other dragons. "This human crossed into our territory. She knew the penalty. She knew we would likely kill her when we returned. She came anyway. Not to steal, not to destroy, but to save lives that meant nothing to her. Lives that belonged to a species her own kind fears and mistrusts. His ancient eyes swept across the group. I have seen dragons die for their young. I have seen dragons risk everything for their families. It is the way of our kind. We are fierce in our love, absolute in our protection. But I have never seen an outsider do the same. Not once. Not in 6,000 years. He looked back at the body. Until today. Seraphil stepped forward. What are you saying, Elder? I am saying that this human earned something no outsider has earned in 4,000 years. Not since the architects helped us survive the plague. Not since we bowed to them in gratitude and swore eternal friendship. A ripple of shock went through the gathered dragons. They knew what he was suggesting. The bow was sacred. It represented a debt that could never be repaid, a bond that transcended species and time. No dragon had bowed to a non-dragon since the architects died out millennia ago. You cannot be serious, Thornix said. She was human. Humans are not worthy of the bow. Are they not? Carveth asked quietly. Then tell me, Thornix, what makes a being worthy? The old male had no answer. Carveth continued. The architects earned our bow because they saved us when they had no reason to. They saw our suffering and chose to help, even though it cost them. This human did the same. She saw our children dying, and she chose to save them, even though it killed her. He walked slowly towards Su Min's body. The hatchlings parted to let him pass, their small eyes watching with something like awe. If we cannot honor such sacrifice, then we do not deserve to call ourselves noble. If we cannot recognize courage in another species, then we have learned nothing in 6,000 years. If we cannot bow to this human, then our traditions are not worth keeping. He stopped beside the body. The golden hatchling Bile was still pressed close to Su Min's side. She looked up at the massive elder dragon without fear. Carveth lowered his great head. Slowly, with tremendous dignity, he bent until his crest touched the ground. It was the deepest bow a dragon could give. A bow of absolute respect. A bow that said, I recognize you as my equal. I honor your sacrifice. I will remember you forever. For a long moment, no one else moved. Then Seraphil stepped forward and bowed. Then another dragon and another. One by one, every adult in Ember Valley lowered their heads in tribute. Only Thornix remained standing. He looked at the bowing dragons, then at the human body, then at the hatchlings watching with wide eyes. His face twisted with conflicting emotions. Finally, with a sound like a sigh, he too bent his ancient head. The 17 hatchlings watched their parents and elders bow to the woman who had saved them. They did not fully understand what was happening, but they felt its importance. They knew that something extraordinary was taking place. Byel pressed closer to Su Min's still form. In her young mind, she made a promise. She would never forget this human. She would never forget what courage looked like. And someday, somehow, she would make sure the rest of the galaxy remembered too. The sun reached its peak over Ember Valley. The dragons remained bowed in silence. And in the quiet, sacred space, a bridge between two species was built on the foundation of one woman's incredible sacrifice. News travels fast in the galaxy. Within hours of the dragon's bow, the story had spread across 100 worlds. Scientists who studied dragon behavior could not believe what they were hearing. Politicians and diplomats scrambled to understand what it meant. Ordinary people stopped what they were doing to watch the footage captured by the research outpost cameras. A dragon had bowed to a human. Not just one dragon, but an entire colony. It was the first time in 4,000 years. It was impossible. It was incredible. And yet it had happened. At the research outpost on the edge of dragon territory, Dr. Chen watched the video recording for the 10th time. He still could not quite process what he was seeing. Those massive creatures, so proud, so ancient, so powerful, kneeling before the body of his colleague. She was right, he said softly. She said they were people. I thought she was being sentimental, but she was right. Quan Jeho stood beside him, his eyes red from crying. She knew. She always knew. We should have listened to her. We should have helped her. Would it have made a difference? Dr. Chun thought about that. Probably not. She would have gone anyway. That was who she was. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what the dragon's bow meant for interspecies relations. Some argued it was a diplomatic opportunity, a chance to finally establish formal ties with the dragonkind. Others worried it would set a dangerous precedent, encouraging reckless behavior in sacred territories. Elder Carveth sent a message to the council. It was simple and direct. The human Park Sumin entered our valley uninvited. By our law, her life was forfeit. But she did not come to steal or destroy. She came to save our children, and she succeeded at the cost of her own life. We honor her sacrifice with the highest tribute our kind can give. This honor is for her alone. It does not change our laws or our boundaries, but it recognizes a truth that transcends species. Courage is the same in every language. The message sparked debates that would continue for years. Philosophers wrote papers about the nature of heroism. Ethicists discussed the balance between law and morality. Children in schools across the galaxy learned Sumin's name and asked their teachers to tell them her story. On Varth, the dragons made preparations of their own. They would not let humans take Sumin's body away. When Dr. Chen sent a request for recovery, Carveth refused. She died in our valley, saving our young. She will rest in our valley forever. This is not negotiable. Instead, the dragons built her a memorial. They carved it from the living rock of Ember Valley, using fire and claw to shape stone into something beautiful. It took weeks of work. Dozens of dragons contributed to the design, adding their own touches, their own tributes. The finished monument stood 30 feet tall. It showed Sumin as the hatchlings remembered her, carrying babies in her arms, her face determined and kind. Around the base, dragon glyphs told the story of what she had done. Every detail was recorded. Every trip through the poisoned tunnels. Every moment of courage. Beside the dragon glyphs, human script spelled out her name and a simple message. Park Sumin. She chose 17 lives over her own. May we all find such strength. The humans were invited to the memorial's dedication. It was the first time any outsider had been allowed into Ember Valley by dragon invitation. Dr. Chung came, along with Jeho and several other researchers. Sumin's family came too, a mother and brother flying all the way from Earth to stand in the place where she had made her final choice. Sumin's mother wept when she saw the memorial. Her brother held her hand and tried to be strong. They had known Sumin was special. They had always known. But they had never imagined their quiet, bookish girl would become a legend. Elder Carveth approached them slowly, mindful of his size. To his kind, he was graceful. To humans, he was terrifying. But he bowed his head to them as he had bowed to Sumin, showing them the same respect. "Your daughter saved 17 of our children," he said. His voice was gentle, softer than anyone had ever heard it. "In 6,000 years, I have never seen courage like hers. She will be remembered by our kind for as long as we exist." Sumin's mother looked up at the ancient dragon. Tears streamed down her face, but she managed to speak. "She loved your kind. She always said you were misunderstood. She wanted so badly to build a bridge between our species." "She did build that bridge," Carveth replied. "With her own hands. With her own life. It is a bridge we will protect forever." He turned and gestured toward the valley. "You are welcome here whenever you wish to visit. This is no longer forbidden ground for your family. Su Min made it sacred in a new way. The dedication ceremony lasted until sunset. Dragons and humans stood together before the memorial, united in grief and gratitude. The hatchlings Su Min had saved were there too, now a little older, a little bigger, but still young enough to remember the soft creature who had carried them to safety. Byel approached Su Min's mother during the ceremony. She was growing fast, her golden scales now bright as sunlight. Around her neck hung something that made the old woman gasp. It was Su Min's research badge. The dragons had found it in the rubble and given it to Byel, knowing she had loved the human most. The golden dragon pressed close to the old woman and made a soft sound. A sound of comfort. A sound of connection. Su Min's mother hugged her and cried. And for a moment, the distance between species disappeared entirely. That was the real bridge Su Min had built. Not treaties or trade agreements. Just simple understanding. Just the knowledge that love and courage and sacrifice meant the same things to dragons as they did to humans. It was a beginning. A small one. But beginnings are where the greatest journeys start. 20 years passed. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The bridge Su Min built with her sacrifice had grown into something far larger than anyone imagined. What started as a single act of courage had become a movement. Humans and dragons worked together now. Not as enemies, not as strangers, but as partners. Dragon scholars shared their knowledge of ancient history with human researchers. Human engineers helped dragons rebuild damaged nesting grounds on distant worlds. Trade flourished. Friendships formed. The wall that had separated their species for centuries crumbled piece by piece. At the heart of this new alliance was a golden dragon named Byel. She had grown into a magnificent creature. Her scales gleamed like molten gold in the sunlight. Her wings stretched wider than any ship in the research fleet. Her eyes held the wisdom of her kind and something more. Something uniquely hers. A spark of compassion that other species recognized and trusted. Byel had become the first Dragon Ambassador to the Galactic Council. It was a position that had not existed before her. She had created it herself, arguing that dragons needed a voice in galactic affairs, if they were ever to be truly understood. The Council had been skeptical at first. Dragons were famously proud, famously isolated. What could one young dragon accomplish that 6,000 years of elder leadership had not? But Byel was different. She spoke to other species not as a superior being, but as an equal. She listened when others talked. She admitted when dragons had made mistakes. She asked questions instead of giving commands. And when anyone wondered why she was so different from other dragons, she told them about Su Min. I was dying when she found me, Byel would say. Poison in my lungs, weakness in my legs. I could not even walk. And this small human woman, this creature of soft skin and fragile bones, picked me up and carried me to safety. She did not know if my kind would honor her sacrifice. She did not know if anyone would ever know what she did. She saved me anyway. Byel would touch the research badge she still wore around her neck. Worn and faded now, but still precious. She taught me what courage looks like. Not the courage of strength or power. The courage of love. The courage of choosing to help even when it costs everything. On the 20th anniversary of Su Min's sacrifice, a special ceremony was held in Ember Valley. Representatives from dozens of species came to pay their respects. Humans and dragons stood side by side before the memorial. Su Min's aging mother sat in a place of honor, surrounded by her grandchildren who had grown up hearing stories of their legendary aunt. Byel addressed the crowd. Her voice carried across the valley, strong and clear. 20 years ago, I lost someone who loved me for only a few hours. In that short time, she changed my life forever. She showed me that the bonds between beings are not limited by species or language or history. They are created by choice, by action, by sacrifice. She looked at the memorial, at the carved image of the young human woman carrying dragon babies in her arms. Su-min never lived to see what her courage created. She never saw humans and dragons working together. She never saw the walls come down. She never saw peace. But she believed it was possible. She believed it so strongly that she was willing to die for it. Bile turned back to the crowd. Every treaty we sign, every friendship we build, every child who grows up in a galaxy where dragons and humans are allies instead of enemies. All of it exists because of her. She planted a seed with her sacrifice. It is our job to help it grow. After the ceremony, Bile found Su-min's mother sitting alone by the memorial. The old woman was frail now, her hair white, her hands trembling. But her eyes were bright as she looked up at the golden dragon who had loved her daughter. "She would be so proud of you," she said. Byeol lay down beside her, curling her massive body to provide warmth and shelter. I wish she could see it. Everything that happened because of her. Maybe she can. The old woman smiled. My mother used to say that the people we love never really leave us. They live on in the choices we make, in the kindness we show, in the bridges we build. Bile considered this. Do you believe that? I believe that my daughter saved 17 dragon children and died smiling. I believe that her sacrifice meant something. And I believe that as long as there are people like you, people who remember her, people who try to live up to her example, she's never really gone. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun set over Ember Valley. The memorial cast a long shadow across the ground, pointing toward the future that Su-min had made possible. That night, Bile flew back to the Galactic Council. She had work to do. Treaties to negotiate. Disputes to mediate. A galaxy to help heal. But before she left, she stopped at the memorial one last time. She pressed her golden head against the carved stone and whispered words that only she and Su-min could hear. Thank you. For everything. I will make you proud. Every day for the rest of my life. Then she spread her magnificent wings and rose into the sky. Below her, Ember Valley glowed in the moonlight. Sacred ground. Holy ground. A place where 17 babies had been saved by a woman who believed that love was stronger than fear, that courage was stronger than death, and that the smallest person could change the entire galaxy. The stars glittered overhead, countless and eternal. Somewhere among them, Bile believed Su-min was watching and smiling. The monument in Ember Valley still stands today. Dragons and humans visit it together, year after year. They read the inscription carved in 2 languages. Park Su-min. She chose 17 lives over her own. May we all find such strength. And then they look up at the sky and remember that heroes are not born. They are made. One choice at a time. One act of courage at a time. One sacrifice at a time. The bridge Su-min built still stands. It always will. Because some things are too precious to forget, and some people are too extraordinary to ever truly die.